Today we'll be talking about the fourth topic in land and water use, the fourth lecture, topic 5.5, which will be irrigation, and 5.6, which will be pest control methods. 5.5, irrigation. Basic ideas, the objectives that we're going to be doing is describe different methods of irrigation. We've got a whole different types of them. You can see it in there. Everything from we'll be talking about waterlogging, furrowing, and stuff like that. We're going to be talking about the benefits and drawbacks for all of the irrigation. Furrow irrigation is, as you can see up there, is where trenches are dug beside the crops and filled with water. So basically you have the holes, you build up a low mound in between the trenches and where the crops are going. It's very easy to do, inexpensive, and the water seeps into it very slowly. But it's fairly not very good as far as water loss. About a third of the water is lost due to runoff and or evaporation. Flood irrigation is terrible. You flood the entire field, but it's very disruptive to the plants. Why? Because it waterlogs them. It basically waterlogs the soil and drowns the plant, which we'll go into a little bit more. It's basically called root rot. 80% efficient, only 20% runoff because it's surrounded by berms. Drip irrigation developed in Israel because of the desert. It's very efficient but very, very costly. Why? Because what happens is you put these little pipes, sort of like garden hoses, underneath all the crops. And then you put little holes in them so that the water can slowly seep out. Only around the roots are where the pipes goes, the hose goes, and it keeps it there. However, it's fairly extensive work to get it done. The last type of spray irrigation, what happens there is ground or surface water is pumped into spray nozzles. As you can see on the machine that we have there, where you've got this thing right here. Well, that by itself is expensive. Why? Because you have to build it, then you have to have a motor here that will be able to turn it around and around, and you have to pump the water through this entire thing. Very expensive as far as energy efficiency. Waterlogging, this idea is where the water saturates the ground. As you can see it to the right, unsaturated just has the water at the bottom, where all this place right here has lots of air in it. With saturated, you've got no place for air, and that's a major problem with it. Because there's no place for air, the roots cannot get the oxygen that they need. Therefore, it either kills the plant or stunts the growth. Solution for that is drip irrigation or soil aeration, where you poke holes in the soil, which allows air and water to drain through the soil down where it gets deeper. As you can see there, you can either do it manually with using your foot, or you've got machines that will dig down into it. And so what happens is you've got these little holes in there where the oil, the air, and the water can seep down, and it gets down below the roots so that the roots are actually going deeper. Soil salinization is another problem with irrigation, where salt builds up over time. If groundwater is used for irrigation, there is a small amount of salt in it. If river water is used, there's a small amount of salt in it. And when the water evaporates, the only thing that evaporates is the distilled water. Salt doesn't go up, just the water. And therefore, salt is left over time. In the San Joaquin Valley, where this has been used for long periods of time, there are areas where the soil salinization are toxic. They can't grow any plants. Before they're toxic, it dehydrates the plants, preventing growth. Solution, let's use drip irrigation again. Soil aeration, flushing with fresh water, or where it tries to get rid of the salt. How do we use water globally? If you look, one way is by the industries such as power plants, such as electric plants is a big one, but you can see the electric plants there, the nuclear power plants there. Another place is us, we the people, where we drink the water, we shower, and we flush the toilet. Agriculture, where we have the water for livestock, irrigation, and so forth. And if you look at the graph, the pie chart up in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that 70% of it is in agriculture. 11% is used by us, and the vast majority of that is with toilets. The remaining 19% is used by industry. So aquifers. Aquifers is where water is stored underground, and where the water has to percolate down through the soil. They've been used for hundreds and thousands of years because it's water that's always there. Now, with this, there are ways to replenish. The water is replenished up at the recharge zone, and so we've got the solid rock here. But you've got an area up here where the water is able to go in, and it percolates down. Now, we can get the water up if we drill holes into it where we bring it up. Now, sometimes we have something called unconfined aquifers, like where there's a recharge zone. They can recharge quickly. However, if there is no recharge, where it's been there for thousands of years, just the water sitting there, not able to get in or out, it's much harder for the water to come to get in. Now, aquifers can be depleted. If it's just depleted out in the middle of the Midwest or someplace, you're going to get this cone of depression because so much is used by this particular well that is going to fall down. However, if you're doing it in the middle of a city, what's happening is the well is bringing the water up here, and if you're too close to the ocean, like Long Beach, you're drawing too much up, you're going to get salt water coming in, and it's going to make the drinking water salty, which is not very good. So what is the FRQ we can have for this? Describe how soil salinization occurs, propose a solution to prevent or remediate, and identify one disadvantage of your solution you propose. Pest control methods, topic 5.6. We're going to be describing the benefits and drawbacks of different methods of pest control. So, pesticides, chemicals that are toxic to pests. For example, rodenticide is toxic to rodents. Fungicide is toxic to fungi. Insecticides are toxic to insects, and herbicides kill plants. Now, there is a possibility that eventually pests may become resistant to pesticide if we use too much. Why? Because there's genetic biodiversity. Some of the pests are very, very susceptible to it. Some of them are macho. That doesn't bother me. And therefore, they're resistant to the pesticide. So, the pesticide artificially selects for the strong ones, and therefore they start getting stronger and stronger and stronger, more and more resistant. This is called the treadmill effect. Sort of like you're on a treadmill. First time you get on a treadmill, you just walk with it horizontal. But as you get through more and more time, you're going to start having it go uphill. You're going to incline it. And because you're inclining it, you're going to have to add more and more energy to it, just like add more and more pesticides to it. And so as you can see here, the first time you apply pesticide, these die. The weak ones die, but the strong ones are left behind. And so what happens is eventually they're going to become, through time, the strong ones are the only ones going to survive, and therefore they're the only ones that are going to be able to reproduce, and they get stronger and stronger and stronger. And you can see from 1996, when Bt crops were first introduced, to now, the number of resistant species has gone up greatly. So GMOs are another way to prevent organisms from bothering what you want, the plant you want to grow. So what happens with GMOs is it's genetically modified. For example, the BT corn have a bacteria gene injected into their genome so that it makes it so that the pest can't bother it. For example, another one is Roundup Ready. These crops are GM resistant to basically Roundup, so that when they spray Roundup on the field, the corn does not die, but all the other plants in there do. And so what happens here is we add the gene, the things on here that want to eat it can't, because the gene is on there producing chemicals that the organisms can't handle. And therefore, the BT corn survives. Now, what happens is because BT corn has decreased insecticide use, the corn makes its own insecticide. However, sometimes, for example, Roundup has increased herbicides resistance. Why? Because what's happening there is the Roundup is going to be added because the corn, cotton, and soybeans that have that are genetically modified won't be affected, but all the others are going to be killed. Well, what happened is all the others are becoming more and more tolerant to Roundup. So, GM crops are all genetically identical, so there's no diversity. If there is a disease or a pest that is not affected by the genetic modification, that means every single plant is vulnerable. And since there's no genetic material, no chance of genetic mutation, all of them will die. For example, this is what happened in Ireland. And originally in Peru, they had over 100 different types of potato. And if a blight would occur, some of them would die, but there would be plenty left. But in Ireland, they only planted one type. And when the blight came and killed them all, the people died. They starved to death. So, what is the practice FRQ for this topic? Can you describe one economic advantage and one economic disadvantage of using genetically modified crops? Thank you.